本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? It's April 14th, 2023, and you are listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 558. I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and I'm joined by Ricardo Contreras.
Hello.
Patrick Klepek.
Hi.
And Renata Price.
Howdy.
So, Patrick, I just was kind of curious about something today, because this sort of seemed to be what I woke up to, which is that everyone's mad at Redfall, which is interesting, because people haven't really been talking that much about Redfall, and now they're talking about it.
I will say,
annoyed.
You did miss the conversation. I think you were out when Ren came in and we talked about the game, and she had played the game and actually came out fairly positive about where that game could go. So I think actually in the arc of where Redfall has been in the last 6 months, where we went from like confusion but loving Arcane and like hoping for the best, maybe feeling a little bit weird after Deathloop, because I know people were very high or very low on that game, but came out of Ren playing Redfall going like, maybe they're onto something, and that it's just like a game was marketed poorly, which would not be the first time.
So one thing that's relevant to the controversy that I kind of passed on in my preview coverage, because I didn't think it was like worth talking about because I was playing a preview build. That game didn't run great.
I mean, that's true of most games at that stage. So that can be telling only with hindsight, I would say.
And I think it is in this case, because I think that this game may have struggles with optimization that may make a performance mode on consoles more difficult.
Today, or as of recording, the official Redfall Twitter account announced that Redfall is launching on Xbox consoles with a quality mode only. Xbox Series X, 4K, 30 FPS. Xbox Series S, 1440p, 30 FPS. 60 FPS performance mode will be added via game update at a later date, with no details on what the later part means. Lots of games these days get day one patches. Sometimes those day one patches are given to reviewers who have early access. Sometimes they are not. It is kind of depends on the game. Like, we exist in a world in which when a game, quote unquote, goes gold, that means absolutely nothing except that if it's a disc game going to be sold physically, discs are being produced, and that's the version that's on the disc, and then the team starts working on the game you will actually play when it launches. But here, like this announcement, I think alongside a lot of confusion over what is Redfall, like what is the footage they're showing. I think it's been a game that has had a very confusing rollout since its launch, and I think Ren's hands-on was clarifying, if not necessarily like letting us draw any like huge conclusions, but it was at least like, I think we felt a little bit better about it. And that might still be the case for the game that is being played, but I think, this opens up like a broader conversation about something that happened with this current generation, in which we've had 60 FPS games in the past. Fighting games frequently are, if not exclusively, run at higher frame rates because of the way they play. Shooters have trended in that direction in the last couple of generations, in which they, if you're playing on an Xbox or a PlayStation, you're going to be getting most likely 60 frames a second playing a Call of Duty or a game of its ilk. But broadly speaking, games tend to run at 30 to 40, or often less, depending on the game, or if you're playing on a Switch. And with these newer consoles, there was the introduction of things called performance modes, which essentially are like, do you want 60 FPS and it's going to run at 1080p, like, something like that. Every game handles it a little bit differently. Some games like Spider-Man or Ratchet and Clank have like a long list of different options you can have. Like, you can choose, a performance mode with ray tracing, a performance mode without. But not every game has those. They're not system level. They're game specific. They're developer specific. But I remember positing at the time that this stuff was dropping, as someone that's been a console player in the past, that sort of got used to and thinks essentially it should be okay that games run at different frame rates, even though I understand people's desire to have them run at higher frame rates. Once you gave people a taste of this, was what kind of backlash, what was going to happen as games inevitably wanted to do. There's certainly the scenario that Ren is talking about, that maybe it's an engine issue, it's a technology issue, it's a pipeline issue. But also inevitably games were going to want to just do more on these locked boxes, and we were going to start trending towards frame rates that were lower across the board, as opposed to every game is going to run at 60 frames a second. So as you pointed out, Rob, this has caused quite a, it's something that is like mostly a, like, I don't know how much this is a Twitter and extremely online thing relative to the mass audience. Actually, I do know a little bit more, but we'll get into that later. But it's caused a lot of conversation and anxiety about the Xbox and Redfall and frame rates. Ren, you're someone that probably plays shooters more than any of us, although probably broadly on the PC. But yeah. I'm curious what you make of all this.
I mean, I will say that like sub 60 FPS on a shooter can be legitimately like deeply disorienting for me at this point. Like really, really disorienting. If I have a game that's like running at like a solid 45, that is still like too low for me to be able to like feel reasonable. And like there is a genuine reason why pro players try to maximize frame rate by playing games on low settings, right? There's a reason behind that. Even if it's like partially psychological, there is definitely like a sense of discomfort or, you know, taking extra time to process information that comes from having to like dealing with hitching and stuff. And like the thing that I'm more concerned about is, in the case of Redfall 1, I played that game and it was running at 30 FPS, and occasionally it did like hitch a little bit, and there was like moments where I was like, this doesn't feel quite right. And like, if that's not a solid 30, that is a problem, because the hitching is where it gets like really bad. Because you can make a game run smoothly at 30 FPS. You can do that, right? What you can't do is make a game feel smooth, especially a shooter, while your frame rate is like jumping up and down constantly, or frequently enough that it is like noticeable.
Unless that's like, a mode, right? There are some games that'll have, like uncapped frame rates, where it's like, hey, look, it's going to bounce a little bit, but you're there so that hopefully you can achieve the highs. But that's a personal choice of how you're experiencing the game, as opposed to, as you're presenting, where it's like, hey, a locked, extremely smooth 30 that is built around that experience can work. But if what is happening here is, hey, we're capping it at 30 because we're running into issues, and we're going, it's a little bit like The Evil Within when it came out, and it was like, look, for cinematic reasons, we have these black bars. And then the game came out and didn't run very well, and I was like, I think these black bars are here because you're trying to remove visual data to make the game run better.
But like, I think there's also a bit of like variable frame rate stuff does like help with a lot of things, like the way a game appears on the screen. It can make a game look smoother, but like I do think once you dip below 30, you start having like dips below 30 that like might be significant. There's just a limit to how smooth the game is going to feel. You know what I mean? It's like I've been playing more with like I can watch my frame rate bounce up and down a little bit when I'm playing Fortnite, right? Where it's like, okay, it's up around like 100, 120, and then like, whoop, it's really dipping now because there's a lot of stuff happening, and it's like dipping towards 60.
Do you always keep the frame rate on, or is that just, I've got a new rig and I want to see what it does?
I just wanted to see what all the stuff does.
I just want to note, I am a frame rate always on person. If I am playing a game on Steam that has the option to display my frame rate on screen, I will have it displayed in the upper right.
But like for me at least, I can like, because I have that data there, it's like, yeah, you're right. I can feel like when it dips from like 100 down towards 60, I can feel that little like loss of speed and smoothness, but not that much. You know what I mean? It's like, it still all feels like it's a pretty smooth game, etc. Once it's like dipping, like the difference between like 110 frames per second and like, 60 is significant, but like 60 still feels pretty good, 30 and it's like, oh, I'm down to like 18 or something. That is where you do start to feel like it feels chunky, and it can affect things like the way control inputs feel. And so I could see that being a real issue for a game where like part of what makes a game feel good, even if it's not like competitive, is just if you feel like really in tune with the game. Like it's quick and responsive to what you are seeing, and if they're kind of up against performance issues at like the 30 FPS line, the 30 kind of needs to be a hard line that they can hold.
And also I will say that like you can miss shots because of frame rate dips. Like that is the thing. It's like, and also like frame rate dips can be caused by a ton of things, right? It's not just the GPU or CPU not being strong enough, right? When I played Valorant, I would have issues where I would have frame rate dips because of packet loss, for example, where my like game would just not know what the fuck to do. And so I would have a massive like frame rate drop because of like network issues, for example. And so, you know, once you're adding like because like Redfall is a multiplayer game, there are going to at some point be packet loss issues for some people. And if you're having those on top of like slight frame rate dips, that can get really disorienting and lead to like almost constant, you know, disruptions to play. All of this is to say though, like I want to be clear, I'm not like a huge frame rate freak. I just need it to be stable.
Yeah.
And when things are not stable, that is when problems like really start to kick in. And I think that's what people notice more than anything in footage, right? If you show someone like good 30 FPS in a game that's built for it, chances are they're probably not going to notice. But if you show them mediocre 30 FPS in a game that is not built for it, it will become readily apparent immediately. And I worry that Redfall is in the second category of mediocre 30 FPS that the game doesn't feel like mechanically built around.
Well, and it just more broadly speaking, this game has had a lot of image issues. What is it? What is interesting here? How do I play this game? With how many people? And to have in the final weeks this news come out is less catastrophic as much as it is just suggestive of a game that has been, I have no insight into its development. I cannot speak to whether it's been smooth or not smooth, but purely just like observing how it's been rolled out to its prospective audience, like this is just a bad look, especially alongside Microsoft, a company that is essentially self-prided itself on, look, the Series X, this is where you go to game. Like this is where the best hardware is. Best in class. The games are going to run great. We're going to actually publish games that can run at 120 FPS, like when they put out, this is a game like Ori, but there are games that support it, and like those games look sick as shit. And the whole idea is like you're buying this box, this big black box, so that the games can run really well. And not every game is going to line up neatly with that, but when that is part of the marketing approach, and then you have a game that what feels like at the last second, if it came with a blog post, right, like that said, hey, this is our plan, these are the issues we ran into, we're sorry that it, like, because later date, is that a month? Is that day one? Do they not know? If they don't know, say that, because I think where we have landed with a tweet like this is doing disproportionate damage to people's perception of the game, because it reinforces a earned narrative that I don't really know what this thing is, but I keep getting bad vibes. Like bad
You're in the
vibes.
hype building phase, and it's like hey, those expectations, lower them.
Well, they showed the game at 60 FPS, I believe.
Yeah.
I could be correct on this, but I believe like the pinned tweet on the Redfall account is a trailer showing at 60. Now, there's a long tradition of showing games on PC at faster frame rates, and then how they arrive on a console is different. But like that sticks out even more here, where you see this, and it's like, and for me, it's like 4K 30 FPS. You know what I don't give a shit about? 4K. I just don't. Like the Robs of the world, brute forcing it with a 4 series card. That's fine, but I will drop that res 1440 1080. Like I'll take the frame rate any day. And the fact that that's why I think like pushing the idea that it's 4K, I feel that that's less like bragging as much as just maybe obfuscating what's happening here. And what's also interesting is I talked to somebody who should know that is not about this game in particular, just broadly speaking. Hey, have you seen any data about, this is like a really a hot conversation online. And I think it's, it's to some degree is a worthwhile one and spins off in a bunch of different ways that are interesting looking at. But like brass tacks, like for all the players who play video games, how often do they change the quality mode that is presented, the visual mode that is presented in front of them? And I don't have an exact number, but the number is extraordinarily high that no one touches it. Whatever the developer presents as the default settings is what the player will choose to go forward with. And I asked like a follow-up that was like, how many times do they even look at the options menu? It was like dreadful.
Wow,
you can have
really?
options. People don't look at them. And like by people, I mean the biggest possible population of players. Like the people who are going to respond to a tweet, go to Reddit, be on a forum, are important, part of a pie, but are not necessarily indicative of the whole pie. And so it's just worth keeping that context in mind, that basically what I was told by someone who's seen data for this in other games is just, it's like a big sigh of relief because like the assets move quicker from what you're building to a like, you know, cinematic resolution, whatever mode you want to call it, than it is where you're then having to take the exact assets you've created and make them work in performance mode. You're not taking performance and going up. You're taking, you know, quality mode and working down. And that can be an extraordinary amount of work based on the game and how it's been built. All that said, this is the kind of, like, I think shooters are going to be the kind of genre where people expect it. And I think shooters are going to be the kind of genre where people get dinged. And so I was talking with, I have to look it up, someone on Digital Foundry, we're going back and forth on Twitter
John
about
Linneman.
it. Yes. And what John pointed out was that two things can be true. What I just told you is absolutely correct. The vast majority of players, vast majority of players, let's say 98%, are never going to touch those visual settings. But as part of a genre expectation, they can be subverted and the game can look poorer as a result because you just come to assume they look a certain way, where frame rate becomes part of aesthetic rather than technical, right? It's just like, these shooters look this way. Fortnite look this way. Call of Duty looks this way. Valorant looks this way. And a small example I had for that, which is outside the realm of all of this, was my oldest best friend. Like, they play Roblox together, and when there was like a hand-me-down iPad.
I thought you meant my oldest best friend, as in someone I go back a long time with, to like my childhood friend. They play Roblox together, meaning you and them.
Yes.
And I was like, what the fuck is going on over there?
What are you talking
My oldest
about?
child's best friend. And we had a like, when my youngest became old enough that they wanted to watch videos, they wanted to copy their sister. It was like, all right, new iPad purchased. And then we push them all down. And my oldest daughter got a much nicer tablet, and Roblox was eating battery up like it doesn't exist, but running, you know, at a really high frame rate. And they went over to their best friend's house. They were playing together, and the friend looked at their Roblox, a Roblox they had no problem with prior to this moment.
What did you do?
Patrick.
I forced that family to buy a new tablet because
Patrick.
Yeah. I was scolded. I was like, oh, you gave your kid, your Roblox runs at, you know, they didn't say 60 frames a second, but like, it runs really nice. And now my kid's Roblox doesn't run as nice, and they complained about it enough times that we didn't want to hear about it. And so we had to do the tablet shuffle too. And so but again, that is just a small example of this in action of frame rate may not be in the way that we're all talking about it, or like Ren, someone who's like super into shooters, much more hypersensitive to the fluctuations. Yet it affects us all. And like the trickle down of that can have consequences in different ways, such as making a family down the street buy a $350 tablet. Who knows? Well, you know,
Patrick, you mentioned something else there, which is the 4K thing. So yeah, I'm a bit of like a hi-fi nerd, but the thing is, like, I did skip like the 30 generation. Like I was on the same video card for a long time. The other thing, I think part of the box they're in though is like, it's a bit like, were we asking that, like, was there a great clamor for 4K, right? Not really. Just TV manufacturers decided that was going to be the next standard, you know, and like 4K TVs, that was the new technology. We're all going to 4K. Okay, fine. And then console manufacturers made 4K their selling point. It was their target. You know, they're going to make these promises. And the minute you go up to 4K resolution, it's just a lot of data to drive. It's a lot of data to crunch. And like, you know, from the standpoint of, for instance, if you're playing PC games, like, you know, if you look at, as I did over the last like few months, monitor roundups, for instance, what are the best displays for like desktop gaming? Generally, like 4K monitors, like they're there if you want them, but mostly everyone is like 1440 vertical resolution is like kind of the sweet spot for desktop resolution, and it's easy to drive fast, right? Like compared to 4K, it is incredibly fast. You get tremendous frame rates, etc.
That's how I ended up with mine, right? Like I settled on something that was like, I bought an entire suite. Like the card I picked, the monitors I picked were like, this will do 1440p really nice for the next 3 to 4 years, and then I can figure out where I'm at after that.
But out of the box, like the PlayStation didn't even support that resolution.
Right.
It was added later that, you know, if you hook up to a 1440 display, it can drive that. But
there's largely a PC driven thing, right? Like consoles went, you know, 720, 1080, and then 4K with like not really in between. Although I guess the Xbox probably supported 1440 out of the box, right?
Well, I think a bit Sony's probably caught out by the fact that, wait, there's a lot of people who basically they do their gaming at a desk. And so they are using monitors as their like gaming TV. Maybe they don't even have a TV. Maybe it is just like a monitor that's like doing everything. But in either case, you know, they sort of put themselves in a box where so many of the selling points were about like we're gonna be able to do, you know, obviously there's you know the screens with refresh rates of 120 FPS. You know, we're gonna be able to do 4K at 60 FPS. These are hard benchmarks to hit. Especially with anything using like new display technology, like new display features and such. And so to a degree, I do think they're in a bit of a bind here where you want to show it's like this is a properly next gen game. Well, current gen at this point, we're you know a few years in, but the hardware didn't advance that much. These are still hard targets to make. And so I you know, it feels like Redfall's kind of this victim of like, well, we got to hit 4K, you know, come hell or high water, whether or not we are really set up to achieve that with the, you know, with the game we're making and the tech we're making it on. So like to a degree, I feel like I am still not sure in a lot of cases that like the hardware in the current consoles is really as capable of delivering on everything they promise to. And there's just a lot of rubber meeting the road when it comes to how's this game actually going to perform? What kind of frame rates are we actually going to see in the wild?
Well, it's why
as transcendent as we hoped.
Yeah, and with lacking, you know, all the evolutions in, you know, sort of like the AI upscaling, right? Like DLSS and whatever AMD's true whatever solution is called. Like that stuff I think exists on like there's some support for that like on the PS5 and Xbox, but it's not in the way that it is on PC where you could, you know, fine, support 4K, upscale away, like, you know, figure it out. But like those easier sort of solutions don't really exist here. And that's why I'm like, actually, I know that it's taken a while for these machines to become more widely available and a lot of people have just bought them. But as someone that owns a nice PC now, is very happy, spends a lot of time on it, but still plays a lot of games on consoles and does like these performance modes and would prefer them stick around even as games drift away, I could be easily convinced into being suckered into a pro model of both machines that had some of those, like, hey, turns out 4K is really fucking hard. Like, we've thrown some DLSS and like whatever in here to make that stuff work and sing a little easier. I would, in a heartbeat, flip. Well, I can't flip these machines. They were provided by hardware manufacturers, but I flipped something else in my house in order to achieve that. Even if, like I said, the data doesn't support that most people would care for that. But I think you're going to get a lot of, like, when you have a game that people are mixed on, it's things like this that are going to really scratch harder. So if this had happened to another game, like when this inevitably happens to Starfield, I don't think it's going to matter that much. That game is not going to run at 60 frames a second. But it matters for a game like this because people are like, I don't know what to think about this. And that new Star Wars game that looks pretty good, it's coming out a week before. And that Zelda game looks pretty good. Well, technically speaking, maybe not. But looks pretty good from a design perspective, comes out a week later. It's just like Redfall is increasingly walking towards a world of, well, thank God it's on Game Pass because I guess you can download it a month later and see if it's how it turned out. Which is not that's not a great place to be for. Well,
it does sound like the game deserves better than that. It's just it's just unfortunate how this is all being handled. Patrick, something else I wanted to touch on was, so you and I went back, we were playing Dead Space again. Mm-hmm. And that game's really good. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, after every session, I have the like, how the fuck do I play this game? And I have the embarrassing like 20 minutes of trying to relearn the controls, and then I sort of fall into a groove, and I'm like, this game's great. And like by the end of it, I'm like, I'll bet when I finish this, maybe I'll play it on hard and like really try to use the environmental stuff with the force grip to actually like do all the things the game supports, and like try to force myself to play a bit more mindfully of the environment rather than kind of effectively spending my way out of some of these jams. But that original Dead Space was we interviewed the original creative director, and it didn't come up in the interview, but they're working on another game, Immortals of Aveum.
I think Aveum.
You didn't find out? Did they not say that?
They said it a bunch of times in the preview event, but it didn't stick, Rob, which normally I would just correct, but I think that is actually maybe an issue if your title is not readable enough. Wow. Like, it's one thing if it was Immortals, Aveum, or of Aveum. The way a lot of games do it is like for SEO purposes, basically. It's like, we want the cool single or 2-word title, but then we have the subtitle here so that when people Google it, they can actually find it. This
game's got a visceral cinematic campaign.
That is true. That is true. So this comes from the what is it? What's the creator? The original Brett Robbins? No. Let me look. Yeah. Brett Robbins, the original creative director on Dead Space, is the creative director of this new game from a new studio that is being published. It's an EA original program.
It's an EA original.
EA Originals. Okay, so there was EA Partners. That's what like Rock Band. One of the Rock Bands was published through. Brutal Legend. The Japanese shooter where the gun is constantly making dick jokes. Suda 51 worked on it.
Yes. Darkness. It's got the word darkness in there. Shadow of the Damned.
Shadows of the Damned. Yes. Great game. Absolutely love that game.
I remember seeing that game on the shelves of the Family Video and I remember that box art so fucking clearly.
Okay.
It's scorched into my mind.
Ren, I don't know. I think maybe the way to, it's been a minute since we've done Ren's Rentals, but I think a way of expanding that feature might be game that Ren at the time wanted to try but didn't, as opposed to it always having to be a game that you did play and revisiting, because that's my way of watching someone else experience Shadows of the Damned for the first time.
Let's play Shadows of the Damned.
Let's do it. Am I incriminating myself by saying I loved that game, and then the first joke will be slightly homophobic, and I'll go, well, better have left that in my memory. I don't think that's what the game is. I don't. But, so yes, I was able to see a hands-off preview event where they walked us through some story and gameplay stuff for this new game. Brett pitched it as after Dead Space, went on to work on a bunch of other games and projects. I think most primarily known for working on like Call of Duty campaigns. And the way Brett put it in the presentation was they were scripting out this sequence in a Call of Duty game with like a helicopter and a soldier on the ground, and their mind just kept drifting to like, well, what instead of a helicopter, this was a dragon, and what if instead of holding a submachine gun, like you're like wielding magic, and those were like the original sort of idea behind what would become this game, which was like wanting to take all the spectacle of a Call of Duty game and put it into a fantasy setting. And so the presentation I saw, that is what this game is. Like, go look at a modern Call of Duty game from the last 10 years, put dragons in it, swap out your guns, like long range, medium range, short range for spells, and then like all of the hey, we're gonna have a long walk and talk, and then the interface is gonna appear, and then you get to walk. Ren,
I have some questions about these spells. Are we talking like if I have a short range spell and I go skra and it's like a little, is there like a spell SMG?
There was a lot of
now, spell machine gun.
It is probably like when you are giving presentations, when you've workshopped that stuff, it is going to be hard to not make like, this is just like that. But there was a lot of, well, this is kind of like your shotgun. And then like, here's the magic
kind
spell.
of feel like a shotgun.
It kind of looks, it doesn't look like a shotgun because it's coming out of your hand, but functionally it's like, well, you get up close and you blast them.
And are we looking at like a spelper rifle? Is there like a long range spelper rifle?
I didn't see a sniper rifle equivalent.
Quick, conjurer, put on your sacred eyepiece. It will bring the foe closer.
You can zero it at various distances. You wouldn't think you'd have to worry about spell drop, but we haven't figured out gravity.
The winds of magic with a K blow strongly in this part of the plane.
They blow down towards the earth. You can't feel them because you can't feel the winds of magic, but your spell can.
So, Patrick, you see the problem where this does lend itself a bit to, like, you're making spell casting Call of Duty. Now, mind
that's
you,
really what they did. That's what they did. I mean, like, that, and I don't know if that's a bad thing.
I don't know either. Like, to an extent, like, the big visceral cinematic, like, shooter campaign, but, like, that with magic, I'd say it'd be kind of cool.
These games have existed before. What's it called? Something Battle Mage came out a few years ago. Lichdom Battle Mage is the game that I am. I feel like
that title is very funny because it's the opposite. Whereas like most games with like Immortals in Horizon Zero Dawn, that one is. No one knows what the fuck Lichdom is. Can we put Battle and Mage in there as a way of... Okay, Ryan, a few years ago, this says E3 2014.
Yeah. Yeah, listen.
What is our definition of a few years ago?
I was a youth.
Remember the passage of time stopped in the winter of 2020.
Yeah. It's true, it did.
It truly did.
But this is to say that like I have seen something like this before, and I'll be honest, it fucking ruled.
Yeah.
That game had like spell crafting and shit.
This looks tight.
Yeah, Rob, you can like make your own spells. It's very cool. Which is all to say that like as funny as I think this is, and as funny as I think the pitch is, I will say that like these games have done right by me before. The thing that I'm curious about, Patrick, is that like, what does the time to kill look like? Like, are we talking like if I use my spell MG, are we talking about like taking out a guy very quickly, or is it like?
Yeah, it's fast. I'd say it was one of those games that it was really unfortunate that I couldn't even. If I could have just played a minute, I feel like I could say so much more about what this game is, how it feels, and how it flows, because the speed of the gameplay when you're in like the non-cinematic moments where you're doing your walk and talks that are very. Kind of pretty pat for these types of shooter campaigns at this point. It's frenetic. I mean, it has the intensity of a modern Doom game, like Doom Eternal. Okay. Like that is the speed that that's the game that came to mind while watching it. Like there was a sequence they showed us that was separate from like, here's the campaign and you go off to do a puzzle and yada yada. It was like, here's something from the late game that is just 3 minutes of arena combat, like where you have access to pretty much all the spells and abilities, and you're just gonna, we're not gonna talk, you can just watch it and kind of look at the flow. And it's extremely difficult to discern, not because the game is unreadable, but because I just don't know what all the verbs mean, right? Like I don't know, like, what is the cooldown on these weapons or how is ammo, but it looked spectacular, and it looked fast, and it looked really fun, and I think the goofiness is, I think this game's gonna get made fun of, because it's like, taking itself real seriously in a way that I think gives me good vibes, but in a way that like, oh, you're gonna get made fun of, game.
But it's like sincere. It's the risk you take when you're like being sincere.
It's extremely sincere in a way that I found extraordinarily charming. And because I mean, Robin, in talking to Brett when we did that interview, like he is very sincere. That's like the vibe I got from him, despite that was my only real interaction with him other than watching him do this presentation. But it's like, this is a very sincere guy. He cares about this world a lot. And I think it comes across a little goofy because of that sincerity, but I feel like you can feel the sincerity and it breaks out to the other side of you wanting to appreciate it for it.
I will say, like, for as much as Rob and I did joke a few minutes ago about
you would
about
fucking
the
love it if
Spelper
the game
rifle.
had just scripted that scene and had it word for word. You'd
No.
be going like,
No, I wouldn't.
sold.
No. I want to be really clear that I wouldn't, because like I like it when games take themselves seriously. Like this is why I really struggled with the Divinity series.
Sure.
Like I love CRPGs, but like Divinity is like, oh, it's my jerk off spell. Like I don't need that. I don't need that energy in the space. I would like the characters to take the world that they're in seriously. And like, listen, if it's a little bit goofy, I would rather it take itself seriously and let me be the person who's like Spelper rifle, as opposed to like getting ahead of that and trying to cater to someone who's never going to actually respect the thing that
Minsk
they're
and
making.
Baldur's Gate have so much to answer for. That is sorry. That is to a degree. Like, I think the eventual marriage of Larian and Baldur's Gate was kind of inevitable because their house style in terms of humor is sort of stemming from like a character in Baldur's Gate that is the most like, we're gonna lampshade the ridiculousness of like D&D conventions in this game so fucking hard, and it's like tonally very hard to take because it's like every like the character kind of doesn't stop quipping even as the stakes get higher. There's always this like little wink and a nod to like, boy, what a goofball, huh? Like quirky D&D character we've got here. And there is some of that in the main character, and it's just hard to tell. Like I feel like the impression I got in the bits I saw was world itself taking itself very seriously. Main character who's a bit aloof, but I couldn't. It's been a week or two since I've seen the presentation, and so I'd have to brush up on. I don't know what's going to get released, like how much actual footage is going to be out there compared to what I saw. It was just hard to tell. Like, is this a Forspoken situation, right? Like, are we looking at a trickle down, like Whedon approach, approach to like this kind of storytelling, this kind of setting, because like the other characters, the people making this game seem dead serious and are telling you a bunch about its lore and aren't blinking in a way that I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, I don't know if it's any good, but you're taking it really seriously. And I don't know how much of that character is going to then be exactly the thing that we fear.
Well, Patrick, let me run this option by you.
Yeah.
What if they're kind of a BJ Blazkowicz? Like the thing that I've been thinking about this entire time as you've been talking about this, thinking about like speed, thinking about like a high time to kill, thinking about like arena shooter moments was the modern Wolfenstein games as opposed to like the modern Doom games. Because I think that like, one, I really like the modern Wolfenstein games. Two, like I feel like they are the tone that I would look for in something like this, where like modern Wolfenstein like thinks that it's funny, but also is taking funny. It is funny. It's a very funny game, but also takes its characters unrelentingly seriously when they're like actually like having a moment, right? Like
right. Well, also being self-aware. It's why that game's like tonal arc is just like, I don't know how you would write this, but I'm glad that you did, and it like broadly works.
It's astounding they pulled it off.
Yeah.
And that is what I would hope for from something like this. If they're going to have a quippy main character, at least let it be a quippy main character in a world that is taken seriously when it needs to be taken seriously by that person.
Right. And so I don't know where this game will ultimately fall on that, because some of that is, you just won't know until you're in the thick of it, and you get the sense of like how much of this is in the cutscenes, how much of this is going to be in the moment-to-moment combat. But I will say the combat I saw, while it's so hard to tell how a fast-paced shooter is going to feel without having a moment on the mouse and keyboard or a controller, it looked good. Like, it looked fun. Like, it looked like again, merely I think a lot of us, on this call like playing shooters, but I haven't touched a Call of Duty campaign, whether they're good or bad, in a while, because I'm just sort of exhausted of the setup and the framing. And if you just were to take that and do exactly what Brett said, is like, but what if dragon instead of helicopter, and what if medium range spell instead of SMG? That takes me a long way towards wanting to play something very similar, because I am like, love playing indie games. I'm also a sucker for the big spectacle, and putting that big spectacle behind a fantasy, like a new fantasy world, like I'm rooting for it. I came out of it not sure how I felt, but rooting for it, and we won't have to wait very long. It comes out in July. My understanding, the way they were talking about, is the game is basically done. And now, so hopefully before long, maybe sometime early summer, Rob and I will get a chance to actually at a certain event play that game and get a better sense of what it is.
This concept of like Call of Duty, but with like magic and such, also does remind me of. I need to watch the second season, but a style of setting that I really enjoyed was in that Netflix show Shadow and Bone, which is like magic, but also World War I era technology, right? And effectively, you have like World War I, but also mages are there on the battlefield, and you have like a society where magic exists, coming to grips with like industrial warfare, and the question of like, does this magic even mean shit anymore? Like the minute belt-fed machine guns exist in the world, like who the fuck cares if you can throw a fireball? That thing can spit out like 15,000 rounds of ammunition a minute. So like good luck with the fireball. But like it did remind me of just that, like those settings that do sort of fuse a bit more together, where instead of everything, because like the setting is like, because magic exists, nothing is like it is in the world in some ways. Like all the technology is sort of shifted toward magic solves the problems, rather than like there being a sense of like ongoing technological progression. I'm a sucker for those settings where you have like there's magic, but also recognizably like a lot of human historical eras and technologies and bullshit make their way in and sort of juxtapose the two. Also, the Call of Duty thing reminded me of, I took another little, while I was just checking out things that could like, reward a new PC and like be fun to play. I fired up Battlefield 2042 again. Because I was like, I'll bet Luke Plunkett would approve of me playing Battlefield 2042. After 2 like 10-minute waits to find a game, I ended up in 2 empty lobbies. In case you were just wondering how Battlefield 2042 was doing, because I bought in on the like, I've heard it's much better now. Maybe there's something wrong with my setup that the game is just like sending me to empty lobbies, but it didn't feel auspicious for the state of things. So that's my little check-in on me trying to play like a modern mill shooter and it not working. So maybe I should just go get my Call of Duty on until Immortals of Aveum arrives to sate my hunger for that style of game. Speaking of things that are just inherently magical, Cado, tell me about Infinite Guitars.
Oh yeah. So Infinite Guitars is an RPG that came out it's been 2 weeks now. Wow, the end of March feels so much closer than I realized. It's an interesting mix of RPG, like the overworld is kind of action RPG-y, and then there's also a bunch of the big draw is rhythm gaming in there, a kind of reductive but simple way of describing it could be like, Hi-Fi Rush was the like action game mixed with this is an RPG mixed with a rhythm game.
Okay, yeah. Continue.
It has a really fun art style, and has these a bunch of like overlapping systems, like there'll be things in the overworld where you'll be running and dodge rolling stuff, and you have health that carries over into battles. And in battles, I need to back up. There's what's up?
Tell me a bit about this world. Like, so where do the guitars come into it? What do you do? What is this RPG about? And why is the guitar such a key component of this?
Well, I'm still pretty early, so they're still like kind of doing a lot of world setup, but the main gist of it is there's a world where giant robots exist, mechs exist, and we're in like a post-war like era of like there was a giant war, a lot of things got fucked up. There's a system of islands, and you're living on an airship, and you've never been down onto the land of either of these islands. Your dad was a like some sort of war hero question mark. Like nobody really ever tells you his full story, and he died when you were young. But one day you're finally kind of forced down onto land for your but by your like current caretaker. His name is Miguel. And very quickly you're basically running around looking for a magic MacGuffin called an Infinity Core, and everything in this world that is powered by electricity or anything, that electricity also is always in the form of music. Like music is the energy that like powers everything. And there's some really interesting stuff about how basically the kind of enemies that exist in the world, the machines that are wandering around and making things dangerous for everyone, have kind of stolen the songs of the people who used to live there, and like they're using that power. So
pungent metaphor for AI.
Wait, are these robots like abandoned war machines, an alien invasion? What's that? Like, why robots?
I'm not
here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, they're we haven't found the origins yet. Like, I'm sure like the game's gonna get there. Like it feels like I've just met.
So nobody made them. This wasn't like warring factions.
No, it
built the robots.
It does seem like that's going to be the thing. It's like there were people. Somebody ended up making these robots. Some of them are autonomous at this point, but it feels like there's a mix of robots what somebody made to like ride in, and robots what are now just kind of like these kind
like
of immortal
Screamers.
beings. Yeah. Yes. And so the kind of rhythm game aspect of it comes in a couple different ways. One is that similar to, but maybe not as polished as Hi-Fi Rush, things in the overworld happen to the music's beat. There's basically a couple of puzzles where you have to basically hit a switch, but to hit switches in this game, you have to do like a little rhythm game section. And basically the rhythm game sections are usually like 5 to 10 seconds of the current song that's playing. And this is one of the like really kind of well done parts of it, is that whatever the especially in battles, this like really shines, is like whatever the current song is, once you actually hit the rhythm section, it just dives into that section wherever you are in the music. And you'll end up getting small snippets of the same song, right? Like you're not playing an entire song all at once. It's usually a very small clip, because it's like each one of those is like a single like RPG, like turn-based attack, for example.
How fun? So I've played a lot of games with note charts. Played a lot of games with this little lane highway.
Yeah.
It is one thing to build a lane highway. It is another to make the note charts fun and the lane highway feel, especially when you play. I have a real problem when I play these games not attached to like a physical object, right?
Sure.
Like every time I've tried to play one of these that has the like, it's one thing if they change the UI and go in a different direction where your relationship with the music and your inputs are fundamentally different than what was like broadly established by, I mean, I get games like Parappa and Lammy, but then popularized by holding a guitar with, or drums and like hitting those. And I just, something frequently is always missing when I'm just doing it on a keyboard or a gamepad. Yeah. And so how does that feel here?
I think the charts themselves feel pretty good to hit. Like when it's like, got like rising and falling motion in the music, like they do a lot of really good, like, basically it's X, Y, and A on like an Xbox controller, right? So it's like the top and bottom one, and then the one to the left. And so there's tons of little, like, there'll be licks where you can just roll your finger down across all three of them in order to hit all three. Like there's things like that where like it's less you're like picking up and pressing as much as you're like kind of rolling your finger over the different buttons in the right order to hit them fast enough.
That's nice because
It's
that's
really-
like that.
yeah.
That is it's a recognition that your fingers are doing something different
Yes.
than the sort of like the replicate. Like I feel like a lot of the games that followed in the wake of like all of Harmonix's stuff was like it just didn't feel like it wasn't a recognition that your inputs are different, and so the layout and like how you do that input should feel different to feel satisfying.
Yeah.
And that sounds like it's a recognition that like, hey, holding a controller is going to feel different, and there's different satisfaction in the way that like moving an analog stick, like there are things that feels just satisfying to do in a game, and that sounds like it understands that like moving your thumb along those buttons in a rotation, so to speak, would feel good.
Yeah, it definitely and you know, it sets up the lane highway to move left to right so that the buttons that you're hitting are lined up with top, middle, bottom. Like it intuitively makes a lot of sense. I do think there's a little, I would want I'm used to a little more feedback on like near misses and things like that. It hasn't been too much of a problem. But what's really interesting about the rhythm sections is that it costs your health to enter them. So like if you're going up and like hitting a switch that's going to solve a puzzle, you like lose 15% of your health. And then depending on how many notes you hit in the section, that's how much health you get back. So if you hit 100% of the notes, you get all that health back. Otherwise, you're losing some amount just by interacting with things in the game. This also applies in battle. Like there's moves that are that aren't rhythm based, that are safe, but they don't do very much damage, and they're kind of like to set up for these big moves that will have you do a complicated section of the song, and but also require that you have a certain amount of health available to feed into them at the beginning. And it's a really, really like it's created a really interesting tension in battles of just like, okay, I have to wait for the right moment to push my luck on. All right, because it also, depending on how well you do in the section, you're either gonna do all the damage or a little under the damage that you're being told. And like it tells you at the beginning when you're picking your attack, it shows you the enemy's health bar, and it shows you like what chunk of health you're gonna do if you hit a perfect, but a perfect can be hard to hit sometimes. So they have this secondary system called cores. It's basically just a little pip, a little charge that you get, and the way to get it is there's a specific attack that doesn't do a lot of damage, but it gives you charge. And there's another mechanic where every time you hit an enemy, a sort of like anger bar fills up. So if you do too many of these, like you could just kind of mash the like light thing like 50 times if you wanted to and eventually whittle down an enemy, but their attack keeps going up the more you do that. So you wouldn't want to do that even if you like had the patience to sit there and choose that same attack over and over again. And the second thing is incoming attacks from the enemy are basically these kind of like mini action sequences where you have to like actively dodge things or else you're gonna take a shit ton of damage. This part I found kind of the hardest to grok, as far as they say it's on the beat, but it doesn't quite feel like it's on the beat to the battle music, and the enemy is flashing on a beat that is I forget the actual musical term, but like if you have like a rock song that's like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, they're on the 1 2 1 2, they're like on every other beat is what they're flashing on. And so like I eventually kind of got it just by feel, because you end up seeing a lot of the same enemies, and they always attack at the same interval. After like there's like a little reticle that appears, and then the attack comes in after the reticle like lines up with your character, which you can move around. You can also avoid just by running to the other side of the screen if you wanted to. But part of the point is that if you do a perfect dodge, if you dodge at the last possible second, you get half of a charge, which is that thing that meter that you want to build up to do the really big, massive damage. There's a lot of basically kind of push your luck mechanics that almost always seem worth going for, but if you like miss, can really, you know, do a lot of like set you back pretty far. But there's also, it's very swingy. It can be very swingy. I've like played like 3 hours and I've definitely lost a few times on like normal enemies, not even bosses. Like one of the early bosses was also pretty difficult. And it's all just like I think I can hit this. I think I can hit this. I'll have 1% health left, and then like I whiff a bunch of notes on the rhythm section, and I'm like, great, I have like 3% of my health left because I was hoping to get to 10% and be fine. But and it's generally really neat. It feels like it feels like a like very a solid but very obvious like freshman attempt at this game. There's maybe one too many systems where if you took that time of development to polish the rest of it, it might have felt a little better. It's not bad, but I can see where it could be an amazing game, and it's only a good game. You know, it's like totally fun. It's on Game Pass, which helps a lot. Just like boot it up, check it out.
I feel like that's my response to any of that. Is
yeah.
Like,
yeah. And it has a really cool animation art style that like there's like a surprising amount of animated cutscenes where like I would assume going through dialogue there's just like, you know, you get your regular like portraits talking back and forth, and like so far there's actually been like a lot of like there's a couple times when it does that, of course, but like more often than I assume there's like a whole cutscene happening as you're like going through dialogue dialogue in this game, and it's really like I dig the art style a lot. I feel like the big thing that kind of sticks out to me is that it feels like someone drew the level maps as one thing. Like it's like the level map is one big drawing that then you're zoomed into, right? Like it has that sort of feeling of like instead of each screen, right, being a thing that they've like kind of set up and like it's like
I feel like I'm running into that more.
Yeah,
it's like
they just like they did the whole thing at high resolution. Like it doesn't look fuzzy, but what it looks like is the scale is like maybe not quite right. It also has this issue of having it in certain parts really confusing environment where I'm like, is that a wall? This doesn't look like a wall. It looks like a sidewalk. But actually I guess that must be raised. Like
but that's just a little lack of like extra polish. Yeah. That you spun with a freshman effort.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I've gotten, and like I like eventually you like find like, oh, I'm supposed to go, this bridge is actually I can go under this one. For some reason, not all of the bridges, like sometimes it looks like I should be able to walk under them and it doesn't. Small things like that. The environments are ultimately not so huge that it's like, and thus I like can't make forward progress. It's like I poke around at the edges, I find where I'm supposed to go. It's fine. It's just
and all though. Like it's on Game Pass. Like, it sounds worth checking out. It's like for sure.
I hope they get like another swing at it. Like I hope like someone helps them make their second game with maybe a few more resources, because it's like this is like a really solid start for any developer, I feel like. And it like, you know, it's just needed like a couple more passes in some places, but I'm still having a lot of fun.
Music games are hard. There's a reason.
Yes. And also, here's the thing that they did that they fucking nailed, obviously, which you have to in a music game. The fucking music slaps. Like, all of the music, overworld music, battle music, it is all great. Shout outs to a friend of the site, Too Mellow, who's got a track, one of the battle tracks is in there. And it like, they have enough variation in all the battle music, but it's like a perfect balance of like there's new tracks every so often, but you get
you still hear your bangers.
You get used to some of the other tracks, which ends up making the rhythm sections a little easier once you I know how this riff is about to go, so I can kind of be prepared for certain fast sections and things like that. Like you start to kind of the way if the first time you play a song on Rock Band, you might not put it on the hard mode immediately. Because you want to kind of learn what the rhythm of the song is if you don't already know the song. It kind of builds that in through its repetition of certain tracks, but it's not so much that it becomes annoying or boring or just too repetitive. Honestly, they've struck a perfect sort of balance there of feeling letting you get to the point of mastering the song before being okay, now we're gonna move on to the next set of battle songs because we're in a new area or whatever. It's really neat.
So that is Infinite Guitars. That is by Nico.
Nico.
Yeah.
2 Ks in Nico. Different Nico. And
as on PC and also on Game Pass. We're going to take a quick break here. And remember, Waypoint Plus listeners get this podcast ad-free. Learn more at waypointplus.com and see how you could fill this break with nothing but cool tunes. Back after this. And we're back. Ren, last time we checked in on Everspace 2, and you played a bit more and you wanted to revisit it because it sounds like you're a little warmer on that game. Even that you were warm toward it, but it sounds like you're heating up on Everspace.
Yeah. It's getting
I'm wearing an
spicy.
NBA Jam shirt, and Rob is like, Ren is heating up. She's hit another shot in Everspace 2.
It's getting spicy, which is to say that I think that the game's narrative really started picking up basically immediately after we ended last recording. It's doing some cool stuff. The main character has is very well characterized as a dude who is deeply traumatized and has complex feelings around death and struggles to understand how other people interface with death because he has a fundamentally different relationship to it as a clone whose memories are transported into a new body every time he dies. And so has this fundamentally changed relationship to death than other people. And so that narrative stuff is hitting better than I expected it to. But also, last time I had primarily been fighting in asteroid belts and debris fields and the orbits of planets. I have started fighting on planets, which is not to say on the ground combat, but you are in a ship that hovers above the ground, and that shit is so good. It feels excellent to zip around through the interior tunnel system of a planet, and that is where it is going full descent mode, where you are flying a ship through these tight corridors, blasting shit that comes at you. And it feels much more descenty than the outside bits, which are similar to something like a chorus or another actual
I'm sorry,
space shooter.
Sorry, you mean a Chorvs?
Chorvs.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Chorvs. Yeah. And also the visual design on some of these environments is kind of staggering. There's this one fight, there's this one mission you do in the rubble of a broken planet, and you can see the molten core of this planet is still cooling off as it radiates into the air or into the space around it, and you're flying through all of these bits of rubble. It's really, really sick. And I'm starting to interact with the Okar faction, which is this alien faction who are sick as hell, and visually pretty arresting. Their ships are really cool, and their architecture rules. Here's a screenshot of an example of the on planet stuff, which is very sick. Trying Trying to see if there's any like
I
stuff
pulled
in
up
the
this
interior.
trailer for showcasing combat above planets.
Excellent.
It does look
This
really,
looks-
really cool.
I can't tell if what I should do is never play this game, but just log on to these podcasts and have Ren increasingly tell me how much I would like it. Or I should actually play it and experience it for myself. I'm enjoying both versions, both of these paths, but every time Ren logs on, I was like, hey, that game that I kind of made sound sick as shit sounds sicker.
There's a whole world of games out there that are more fun to hear someone who has gotten into the game talk about than it is to actually like play yourself, because like it turns out the hooks just won't work as well on you as they do on the other person, but like their enthusiasm
That's not true
is a
here.
hook. But
That's not true here. Like you talked to me about a strategy game. I'm like, God, I guess I need to get into strategy games. No, I don't.
No, you don't.
I don't. But this is different. I think I need to get into this.
This is sick as fuck. It's really sick. I just had a boss fight where the way that the boss works is you have to like pick up physics objects in the environment
God,
to
no.
shoot them at the
Nope.
enemy, and it breaks their shield temporarily,
wrong,
which opens
Rob?
up a
What's wrong,
damage
Rob?
phase.
Are you remembering a certain section of
Patrick,
Dead Space?
You can throw a thing at a guy and open up a damage phase. Don't you want to open up a damage phase, Patrick?
You know, I've had this blog post I've wanted to write forever, but I love throwing things at a boss and opening up a damage phase, and a manual just won't let me write it.
I love damage phases. And like I was really
But you just said bosses, and I was like, this game's got bosses? Like, already, are you just making shit up?
I was really surprised when it happened, Patrick. I was surprised. I show up and this guy shows up and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get you," and I'm like, "Is that a boss health bar? That's a health bar on the top of my screen. What am I gonna do with that?"
He's still my space-faring heart.
And like the mechanic of that fight is really good. You're flying around this like debris field, picking up debris from like this old military battle, or alternatively, this dude has like these drones surrounding him, and you're sniping the drones from like 3 kilometers away with a railgun, boosting in, grabbing the corpse of the drone, and then throwing it at the boss to then like switch to your like close range weapons, and then like lighting him the fuck up. It's great. I like it a lot. In a like just like purely like mechanical sense, I think the game is like really, really excellent. And it's like joyous and arcadey in a way that like I haven't experienced.
This is so startling because like I remember Everspace 1 came out and it looked like a thing that would appeal to me, and then the reaction from so many people I trust was like, it looks like what you'd want, but it just isn't. It fundamentally is not that. And so I was like, okay, Everspace, like, gonna put that in the not for me bucket, like not what it quite appears to be. And now it sounds like it's every bit that, and that sounds great.
Yeah, I legitimately am coming to the point where I'm like, hey, Patrick,
It's installed.
It's in motherfucker. It's installed.
This might
right
be on a
here.
Midnight Suns arc, to be honest. Like we might be talking about this like come September, and it's like, so I played a bit more Everspace 2. And so I was saying like I thought it was like really good like earlier, and actually this might be one of the greatest games made in the past 5 years.
Yeah, welcome to Waypoint's 2020. Welcome to Waypoint's Game of the Year 2023. This year's Midnight Suns of the Year award goes to Everspace 2.
But it's got a better shot
Yeah.
of getting in a normal category because it came out in April as opposed to late November like Midnight Suns.
Right.
But yeah, no, this all sounds great. Unfortunately it is not I have a flight coming up this week, and so I'm doing the thing where I'm going to download a bunch of things that I'll inevitably not play. But they have warned against playing the game on Steam Deck quite yet. They have not done the optimization pass to make it work on there yet. So I've downloaded it to my PC, and it is on my Steam Deck, but I'm waiting for them to do kind of like the post-launch, make that run decent on low settings on the deck, because that would be the ideal situation for me. But it is installed on my PC, and I promise to take a look at that game very soon.
Good. Rob, I'll just let you know. I have trade goods sitting in my inventory that I'm holding off on. Listen, hey, I got those cybernetic implants for so fucking cheap in the Cado system. Are you kidding me? It was the lowest possible price you could get them for, 277 credits.
And then
Max price 599. I could double my investment. I spent 10,000 credits on those goddamn cybernetic implants, and all I got to do is find the right system.
it's so
all I
good
got to do
that
is find
you
the right
can't
system.
be that the game will not track, and you certainly cannot be bothered to track how much money you could have made doing a bunch of deals with that inventory space in the intervening time, even hauling it around. Like, I think the minute these games introduce an opportunity cost tracker, like, the angst over these systems will just be crippling.
Well, here's what I'll say. I have not filled up my inventory. That has not been a problem.
Okay.
I am not like I'm not stocked up on trade goods. You can hold like 10 stacks of these cybernetic implants. So I have 28, and they're taking up 3 inventory slots of like a 20 slot inventory. Yeah. Like I'm good. I'm doing okay. It's not like I'm like hauling around like a cargo vessel that has like 30 inventory slots, but like, you know, that's there's a world. I can own multiple ships. Do I have multiple ship money? No, surely not.
But once you sell those cybernetic modules, like, you'll
not
be
quite.
a healthy step closer.
To get the good ship, Rob, that I'm looking at, the one that I want, 90,000 credits. That's a lot of credits.
Yeah.
The current ship I have costs like 25K. So if I trade it in, it's like a 65,000 credit purchase. Doing like a side mission, like a side quest, like just like a normal job, it gives you like 6,000 credits for the area of the game that I'm in. And so like a couple of quick jobs and then like some trading, and like I could afford the good ship if I sold my current one. And so like it definitely goes at like a much faster clip than something like a Elite Dangerous. So like you could log on, like, you know what I mean by log on. It's not a multiplayer game, but you know what I fucking mean.
You have a
boot up
sesh.
the game, have a sesh, have a quick sesh, 30 minutes, an hour, make enough to get your way most of the way to that ship, and like leave it with like some cool gear. And the loot has been picking up a little bit, but not so much that I'm like constantly switching things out. I have never picked something up and gone, oh, fuck me, I guess I picked this up.
Yeah.
It's always been like, fuck yeah, that has a name. Hey, that blaster's got a name. It's called the Eclipse. I want that. And that has been like a very like satisfying build. So yeah, I'm feeling hotter on Everspace 2 as I put more time into it.
And so maybe, who knows, like maybe next week, this is just like, we have the Everspace 2 pod. Everyone's just like full goblin with Everspace 2.
Well, eventually it'll just, you know, kind of like when Elden Ring came out and it was like, oh wow, this is another segment on Elden Ring. You know, it's like eventually we're gonna have to just spin off for Waypoint Plus subscribers, like the Evercast, where we're just, you know, logging our, you know, right next to the Shack Cast, is this as we work our way through Everspace 2.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really weird. They did 34 episodes on this arcade shooter. It was like really strange.
There's just the entire one where they talked about ship builds. It was like really tedious, but kind of compelling.
I like that you said Evercast because it's Everspace, but it could also just be any game that we're going to talk about forever. The ongoing cast, the Evercast.
Hey, sorry,
that's
we've
where
taken
Midnight
this
Suns
game
would have
out
gone,
of the
right? That's where.
Yeah, we've taken this out of the Waypoint radio rotation because we know you're tired of hearing us talking about it. But we're sorry, we're still going to talk about it. And that goes into the Evercast.
That's not a bad
horrible
Actually,
idea.
the hobby horse game, the Evercast, the hobby horse game discussion show.
Yeah. What about like, we had like, because here's the thing. If we do like a small episode of that, it can be like 20 minutes.
Right.
Like if we put that on the Waypoint Plus feed.
Rob, you never have to hear about Destiny ever again.
We could just do like
shuffled off to the Evercast.
No, it would be, but I would
Bye-bye.
still be on that show, so I would be hearing
why would
about
you?
it.
Wait, why would you be on the Evercast?
I'm playing Destiny. I can take this hit for you. You can just move on with your life and stop coming up with questions to ask Cado about Destiny that you don't care about.
I do, though. When it was Cado and I like talking about Destiny, I was like, let's get into this whole situation.
We got
It was
into it.
Cado and I talking about Destiny.
When I got locked in a room with
fuckers.
Cado,
Given no other option.
I decided to show interest in Cado's interests.
Dark.
Patrick, in terms of revisiting games right now, you wanted to close the loop on Bayonetta Origins, which you were also warm on. Did it finish strong for you?
It did. Game of the Year candidate. Sleeper game. Bayonetta Origins is fantastic. I mentioned when I did check in on it a week or so back that I was a game that I was impressed by when I originally played it. Was more impressed by as I continued on and got to the end of it just utterly to the moon on it. It is just a wonderful little action adventure game, like with really novel control scheme where you're controlling two characters on separate analog sticks. It's gorgeous. It's got incredible music, and the combat gains a lot of depth that it doesn't have in the beginning. I think it is a classic example of a game that gains a lot of momentum as it goes along that I wish was more present early on, because I think there's a very easy chance of you playing a little bit of this and being like, well, I hope there's more, but there's not enough here for me to kind of get hooked on. And that really comes to light about halfway through when you start getting what are called sort of like elemental states for the kind of demon that you've summoned. So you can change them into like a fire state and a water state, and that changes their move types, and you're doing these counters and rolls and combat. It's fantastic. And if it's going to be a game that I'm going to have to write a tweet. I've done this before. Like, remind yourself how much you liked Bayonetta Origins at the end of the year. I think I did that for Celeste, and then people reminded me of that tweet. And I was like, oh, right, that was my game of the year. And then it became my game of the year for that year. So I don't know that it'll quite be that. I don't think I'm that high on it, but...
Don't you have a list of games that you played over the year?
I do.
Make yourself a little symbols like legend of like, remember this.
It's part of why I did it.
Yeah.
It's part of why I like have the list of I write down not every game that I play, but every game that makes an impression.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be that I beat it, but it's like, like this game, if I talk about it on the podcast, like that is leaving an impression. Like that's done enough. And then I have that list to reference at the end of the year. But, yeah, this was a really, really, really great game, and I recommend folks check it out. Even if you have completely disconnected from the Bayonetta universe, it does not matter. I was skipping right past most of the story stuff anyway. Like what is here as a game is extraordinarily fun and comes highly recommended. So yeah, closing the loop on that, but just wanted to give it one more shout out now that I've seen credits.
All right, let's dip into the question bucket before we call it a day here. Remember, you can send us all your questions at gamingadvice.com with the subject line questions. Ren, do you have time for one question before you bounce?
I have time. Hey, I've got time for a question.
All right.
I'm taking a dip.
Let's hear from Alice. Alice in Los Angeles. Alice in Los Angeles writes, "Hey, Waypointers. Last night, my Wi-Fi router, typed wife router, maybe it is a wife router, in which case this problem becomes very interesting. Last night, my Wi-Fi router decided to die.
I've needed those before.
Time to reboot my wife router.
This would have been fine, but I have there's too much wife traffic on my network. I really need...
Wait, can I... Sorry, I need to tell you a very important fact about Renata really quick. There was a section in my phone where I put people that I'm dating, like in like my text section, like a category. That category is called Wife City. And so the times in my life where I've been dating multiple people, there have been multiple residents of Wife City, and it is the funniest part of my phone to me.
And the phone has my wife router.
Exactly. This is
right next to New Dog City, Wife City. Yeah, just different borough.
Okay, back to the question. Hey, Waypointers. Last night, my Wi-Fi router decided to die at 2 a.m. This would have been fine, but I have every light bulb in my house connected to a smart home hub that doesn't work unless the Wi-Fi is on, and it led to me turning things off and unplugging for 30 minutes so I could sleep. I kind of regret getting into smart home stuff because as convenient as it is, it also causes terrible headaches like this. Do y'all have any hobbies or bungled ambitions like this that have you feeling stranded or like you just want to move away and never look back?
Oh my God.
So I live in an apartment in New York City, which I think is kind of a universal experience of owning an apartment in New York City. It's kind of showing up and being like, ooh. I guess this is my next 2 years. Cool. That's most of my furniture. However, I do. I don't think I've ever had a hobby that I felt so trapped in that like I felt like I couldn't leave. I bought a bow once. And then I moved to New York, and that kind of ruined. Oh yeah, I bought a bow.
Like a working one, a decorative one.
No, of course I bought a working bow. I wouldn't buy a decorative bow.
A decorative bow would be weirder, Cado.
That's why I'm asking. I want to know.
No, like
People
if I
cosplay weapons and shit, you know, they exist.
listen, if there was an archery range in New York, I would go. Like if there I'm sure there is one. I could find one.
There's someone somewhere has done that. Yeah,
It's probably got a bar in it.
Yeah,
like, that's like the trend of things these days.
But I did purchase a bow and that I never ended up using, which made me very sad. And then that bow no longer exists in my life. That is probably the closest. I don't know. If I decide I don't want to do something, I just won't do it. So I'll simply go home.
They don't have an exact story for this, but one, I have a story of these devices being useful in the opposite direction, which was a couple winters ago. We had horrible snow and cold, and the power just zapped out. And we had just, I think it was the first winter we had my oldest child, and so she was, less than 6 months old when the power went out. We made it through one night because the house was hot enough to like get through that first evening, and then it was like, hey, the house is not going to survive. Feeling really good for having a newborn, a second night in a row. And so we ended up going to my mom's place about 15 minutes away where power was on. And it's like, you're checking ComEd's website. Like, it's hard. Like, when you have a mass power outage, it is difficult. You're not always to know, like, is the power back on? And we were new to the neighborhood, so I didn't really know any of my neighbors yet. So I didn't have anyone to text me that, like, hey, if the power goes on your block, can you let us know? And when I knew the power came back on, was like, hey, your Philip Hue lights, do you want them to do anything? And I was like, the internet's back, which means the power's back, which means we can go back home. Sort of related to that. It's just an excuse for me to shoehorn the story in because I'm slowly dying, trying to let this go. So we have an Apple TV connected to our television upstairs, and it's an awesome device. It's like, even if you're not into Apple stuff, it's an excellent like set-top box to like watch things on. And it comes with a remote, like all these things do. And that remote is a slippery little fucker. It is just constantly falling in between things, hiding away in spots that don't make any sense. But we've always found it. And over the weekend, came home, the Masters was on. One of my kids was asleep. I'm like, I'm going to put on golf for a little bit before I do some chores outside. Put that on, left the TV alone, did those chores, came back. Like, I think some basketball's on. Time to change that. Where's that remote? Oh, it must be in the cushions.
Wait, you just used it?
Just used it. Oh my God. Just used it. Where is it? Well, like many things, especially when you have kids in the house, like, look, sometimes it gets misplaced or you put it, walk to go do something, set it down. Let's give this 48 hours. Like, it's going to show up. And with the Apple TV, you can use, there's an app you can use on your phone, control it. It's not ideal, but we'll get by. 48 hours. No remote. Not showing up.
That was your mistake. The first 48 hours is the most critical in a missing remote investigation.
You're so right, Rob. Because also that, to some degree, that is like not even a bit. That is true. It's like, what were the exact things I did after? And I know exactly what I stood up. I pointed the remote down because the little box is at the bottom and sometimes in these line of sight. And I sat down. What did I do with my hands? I don't fucking know. And so I ended up giving it 40 hours. It's like, fuck it. I'm just going to order a second remote. And then if it shows up in the next 2 weeks, I'll just package it up, send it back. That's not what you're supposed to do with things, but you know what? It's the life I'm living. So the remote shows up and I go to set it up for the new one. It's like, go to the settings. And in settings, what I see is a little battery indicator because the Apple TV is talking to that remote. It knows It can feel it. You're nearby, buddy. You've got
You're
37% on you. But it has no way of communicating where that is. We don't know. There is no speaker on that thing. I have like gone down Reddit holes of like, hey, you can download a Bluetooth like receiver detection app. And all people say is like, boy, you don't know how many things give off Bluetooth in your home until you download something that looks for those signals. You will never be able to use that to find the device. And so in setting it up, you can't set up two remotes at once. So I was like, well, I'm going
my God,
to
it's
just
like you're
try
cutting
and
it loose and consigning it to the waves like in Master Commander.
Yes.
No.
Yes. It was just, and it was causing me but I had to do it because I needed to just give up on this little remote, because if in a world where I could check in on it to see like, well, it's down to 36%, 35%, that would drive me more up a wall. And so I set up the new remote. I kept to the box, and I'm going out of town for a couple of days, and my wife's like, well, you know, what's the most likely scenario? I'm going to find it while cleaning up something while you're gone. And I'm hoping for that. But there's also a distinct possibility that it is just somewhere.
It's lost to fate
Out there. And it is just like the remote's not cheap either.
How much
it's
is
like
Apple TV remote?
it's a $60 remote. You can get knockoffs, but like you really don't want it. Like you want to get the nice one. So I ended up solving the problem for future Patrick. You know, I got a case for it to go around, and so that it can't fall into things. And I bought a little dingus that makes noise. So a little air tag, and it fits right into the remote. So this problem can never happen again. I'm foolproof. But still out there is $60. And you know me, and spending money, spending $60 on a remote that I know is within a... You can hear me! I know it can hear me right now! Anyway, I'm sorry. I was looking for a way to shoehorn that story into this podcast, and that was my opportunity.
You found it.
There's no Find My on those remotes, is there? Wow.
No, it's like the only device that doesn't have any sort of speaker or proximity stuff.
Damn.
They were asked, like the newest version of that remote, which is the one that I purchased. We had like an earlier version. They were asked a question. It's like, hey, like your whole thing is, it's easy to find stuff using an existing Apple device. And like, they're like, yeah, but this one's thicker. It's harder to lose. And I'm here to tell you, that won't stop me.
No,
That won't stop me.
Nice. Great.
Ugh. Rob, have you given up? Well, Rob, not have you. What things have you given up that relate to this question?
Yeah.
That actually answer what they asked?
What have you walked away from, Rob?
You just did a lot of walking away, right? Like this, I don't know, cleaning up a place, excavating physical history necessarily answers the question. But this podcast has been home to many of your rabbit holes. Like, but the ones that have been on the podcast, you sort of arrive at the bottom of the hole, right? Like whether it's a speaker or desk setup, like you get to where you're at that you've dug and you found the bottom. But where is the one? Maybe the monitor, the curve. Is that you
keyboard?
walking away?
Is the keyboard is custom keyboards, right? Is it custom keyboards? Is that what you've walked away from?
You did just buy a replacement for that one instead of seeing the project.
Well, it was just like MK had fallen in love with the idea during my researching it. And so she got the Moonlander, which was sort of the pre-built, like ready-made version of what Ren and I were working on. And then she was like, I hate this. Will you take it? And I was like, yeah, all right, let's see if it works. And it broadly does. And so, I don't think it's as beautiful an object at all as sort of what we had spec'd out, but it had sort of hit a point where it's like, I think it feels like we've kind of hit an impasse here.
And it didn't burst into flames.
Yeah.
That one didn't catch fire.
It came with a little 3.5 connector that is the correct spec. But yeah, like that is an example. But I feel like, the smart home stuff is a really perfect example like this, right? Because like it is, you take something you're going to interact with a ton and you're like, I can create a better system for doing this. But the minute you and day to day, you're probably right. But the thing is, like, then what you've done is you replaced a lot of the day to day friction with maintenance of said system, and that is a different, in some ways, more annoying form of managing this. Like, God, this was like a year or so ago, but like Vinny had this tremendous aside on Nextlander where he was like, telling his son about entropy through the lens of like, hey, you think all these cool gadgets and all the smart home shit that we've got is like good, and I'm here to tell you it's horrible. Like, it's like this ruins my life. It's good, I wouldn't live without it, but also this is miserable to maintain, because now you've gone from a bunch of like simple things that are going to generate a lot of like little friction to, okay, like there's a ton of things that are on and ups now, which means ups batteries degrade. And every time you do that, you have to buy a replacement battery and haul away like a incredibly heavy battery out of this metal casing. And you have to do that for like all your devices on the regular.
He's putting how many things is he putting on an ups?
I don't know, but it sounded like more than a few. It sounded like,
I'm like, what are you putting? You putting like your like family room lamp on a Philips Hue on an ups? Like, what are we doing here?
I mean, if you think about the number of electronics that are in Vinny's home, though, you can sort of get it.
Oh, sure. I can imagine his office. Yeah, I'm just trying to like extrapolate. Like, there's a certain level where like if the lamp light wants to go, let it die. You know.
Well, and then there's the horror of like anything that like where cables are connecting things to other things. If there's any way for like a surge to get into that cable that normally doesn't carry powder, that's your real nightmare. It's a bigger issue with a detached home. I probably don't need to keep as many things on an ups as I do, because like in a building like this, like I didn't have to worry about the rogue lightning strike knocking out my house the way I did when I was growing up in the Midwest, where like that just happened to people.
It happened to me once. It took out the router and the cable modem. And I didn't even know that was a thing that could happen. I was like, no, the lightning wasn't here, and it's like, well, it was close enough, and it got you. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was a problem.
Yeah, so like that's the like, you know, I've known people who they just come back and like clearly a lightning strike hit, and like everything is fried because like one thing was plugged into the wall and it wasn't dealt.
And I'm sure if that happens to you once, then you are so paranoid. Like the risk management you're doing for an isolated event causes you to. And now, granted, like you and Vinny also have a lot in common in terms of like this specific sort of thing. So I can see why you'd be operating on similar wavelengths for sure.
Well, and like so, like my little like tiniest taste of the smart home stuff is I have that ridiculous like they are smart outlet plugs that you put in that can like through your app you control the plug effectively, but also you monitor energy usage, and it's fun. It lets you know like what's
great for Christmas
what.
Trees, things like that.
Absolutely, but also it means that like if I go upstairs,
Rob loves Christmas trees.
so why call them Christmas trees? They're really more winter festive time trees. Maybe early spring, early spring trees. My early spring spruce, fake spruce. Anyway, but like if I go into my bedroom at night without my cell phone, I can't turn the lights on in that room. There's not a single light now that is on a physical switch where I can like flip it and it comes on. And when that happens, I feel like the biggest asshole in the world, because like, why did you do this? Like for the convenience of like, I can operate this from my bed. I've given up the convenience of like, I can just feel for the light switch and turn it on. Now, in my house, the wiring is so bad that the light switches do not do what you think they do. A number of switches in my house will kill a circuit, not actually turn on a light. So it's like you flip the switch and like an entire wall goes dead, because that's just how they wired the house together.
The wiring is so in pursuit of finding a place for the hot tub to be plugged into. What I discovered was the Curse of Demucci, which is this like builder who did a ton of homes in the northwest suburbs. And I know many people that have the similar style of house as mine. And the moment you bring up wiring with them, they go, motherfucker, like everything is plugged onto like 2 circuits. And it's like, that's not how a house should be wired, where you trip one thing. And the reason you're tripping it is because everything on one side of the house seems to fall on it. And it's it's really expensive to undo stuff like that. So you just sort of try to like live with it.
Yeah, it's exasperating how much of like, you know, in these times of like housing shortages too, it's like how much of like built environment we turn all those decisions over to developers and then the shittiest contractors like in the world, who are like, we're going to basically open up a ton of like single detached homes for a new development that's not dense enough. And then, by the way, they're all going to suck in the exact same ways. And everyone's going to have to inherit this. But yeah, like, so the smart home stuff is a good example for that, because like there's a lot of cool things it can do, but it comes with a trade-off.
I feel like the smart home stuff has worked best. Like I remember when I got a couple, you get the impulse to, well, shit, like this is kind of nifty. Scene like shifting, like automatic, like, you know, like kind of time management stuff. I should outfit the whole house with that. And what you realize pretty quickly is you should think about selective situations that it's going to be useful for, right? Like, so we only really did like our kitchen and the family room. And what's nice is like when everyone is up for the morning, like the lights are like dim but available. Like when it's nighttime, like the lights like dim themselves. And
yes.
that part is very useful and nice, and I appreciate that. But but I didn't spread it to the whole house. The one that has been the most useful is this is really only relevant to owning a house, but most houses have a light in front. And I could never remember to turn it off. So I would turn it on at night, flick it on, but then when I would walk the dog, I would realize, oh, that light has been on maybe for 2 days. I've completely just forgotten that light exists. And so being able to buy a smart light that went there is on a timer. It goes on at sunset, like turns off at dawn, and I never have to think about it. Those lights, you know, it cost me like $40 or whatever, like felt expensive, or, you know, to get 3 of those to go out there. But I've never thought about it for 5 years. And it's like some of the best $40 I've ever spent.
This is the other thing, like the smart lighting thing. Something I really love the idea of is, there is something to the whole like reduce blue light, shift to like redder light to like get ready, like for sleepier times, getting ready for bed. And I do love the idea of, I want obviously like some main lighting options to exist that are not like on a network that will just like go to switch, flip switch, turn on, there will be light as long as there's power. But I do love the idea of having the home sort of seamlessly change the environment a little bit to put it into more of a, hey, like this is like one, it sort of reminds you that like it's getting late and you should be thinking about like that it's late and that you're going to bed soon. And two, physically, it's kind of preparing you for bed in some ways. I love the idea of that. And
that's how ours work. Is like it goes in stages. Like it goes from like, you know, the family room light flips on, you know, about 100% at 6-ish, like when the lights are going down, you know, like 8 o'clock when like bedtime is starting to happen for the kids, like it shifts down to 40, like 9 o'clock, 20, 10 o'clock, like it's just off. And like it just sort of is a nice way of the kind of things you would normally do already in the room, but the fact that it happens automatically is sort of soothing in a way.
Right. And I just love the notion of, for me, it's not it's not an outdoor light, but there's a light by the front door that I just routinely forget to turn off because it like lights the bottom of the stairs really well. And a lot of times I'm not sure, like, am I not going to go downstairs for the rest of the night? I don't know for sure. So I'll leave it on, but then I forget to turn it off. And like every morning when I come down, it's like, well, that was going all night. Like I'm just kind of annoyed. So that's an example. I think I got far enough along doing the whole like doing a lot of like Plex server type stuff in the home where like I didn't go so far as to build like a NAS, but I sort of could see what the future looked like, and it was going to be a pretty involved thing to set up, admittedly, a really cool suite of features and tools for the home. But also, yes, it would have become a lot of management tasks that I currently don't have to deal with. And so like those are, I fully understand this impulse of you get halfway into this and you never get it to a place where you're fully happy with it. And now you kind of got like a system that's just kind of like got some built-in jank, and you either don't have the time or the know-how to fully fix it. But also it's like you're so invested in it now, you can't just like strip it back out. So
are you talking about a hobby or owning property? Because that's how I feel. That is how you feel once you own, a condo or a house or whatever. It's like, I'm pretty invested in this. I don't know how to do a lot of the things I'd like to do around here, and a lot of it's really expensive.
Well, so this reminds me. So somebody wrote in. Chris wrote in. A query to the king of executive function. My liege, far be it from me to question your decision-making process, but I must ask, did you consider for a single moment the possibility of just replacing your misbehaving motherboard instead of buying a completely new pre-built computer? Your humble servant, Chris.
Is that Pat? I didn't write that letter, but I did say that when we started this whole discussion, I believe.
But it reminds me of like what you were like. So I think it ties into the whole. There's people like anytime you say, "Oh, I built this pre-built PC. I bought this pre-built PC." There's going to be people who are like, "You should have built your own." They're just ripping you off. Their build quality isn't good. All that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's like it's kind of a weird thing where it's like we said contractors do this like renovation in the loft that turned into an office. And I would bet you if you added up like the actual like materials they used to build this thing out, it's not that much. What I bought was somebody to do it and be on the hook for making sure it like was good and safe and right. Like that's why
if something went wrong, you have someone to call.
Yeah. So like someone is on the hook for this, and it's not like, well, with just a little know-how and YouTube videos and maybe some like manuals, you could figure out how to like build out an extension to your condo as well. And it's like, yeah, but one, I don't have the time or inclination for that. And two, it's like, even if I learn to do that, it'll be me doing it this one time, right? I want to work with somebody who like is doing this several times, a week, basically. Mm-hmm. So it's routine. And it's a similar sort of thing with like PC stuff where it's, like Danny O'Dwyer mentioned this, we were talking about PCs, and he mentioned that like years ago, it felt like the hardware cycles were faster. And so if you were an enthusiast, you were getting into your PC frequently and like doing PC builds and messing around with stuff, getting new parts. And now things have slowed down where it's like you do your build and that can last years. Mm-hmm. And you don't, in that time, unless you're building like tons of PCs for friends, you're not exercising those muscles at all. Like you seal up the PC, and in a shockingly short frame of time, you kind of have all that information kind of leak out of your head. And all just that like physical, like muscle memory kind of leaves. And so every time he builds a PC now, it's like, hey, this isn't fun anymore, because I'm like each time I'm relearning how to do this, and I'm encountering a lot of like the same roadblocks, and it's just not rewarding or empowering anymore. And I think that's kind of where I am at with things like this, where people are like, well, it could just be the motherboard or the power supply. And it's like, yeah, but that's the whole shooting match. Like, it could be the motherboard. It's the motherboard. Like everything goes into it. Uh-huh. Oh, just swap out the motherboard. Yes. Okay. Yes, that is, it is a similar amount of work though to doing a new build. And so that's where I kind of like, that's one reason I was just like, I need to have something show up immediately, because either way this could be the motherboard. And in order to fix that, I will have to get a motherboard delivered and execute a repair that for me will be annoying as hell.
Well, it's it's similar conversations you have when you've got a car for a long period of time. Like, what's the common wisdom when you have to replace the transmission? That's when you should be thinking about whether that's time to move on from the car, because you're starting to outstrip what you're putting into it. And you can put a new transmission in a car and have it last another 10 years. You also could put a transmission into a car and then a bunch of, you're going to spend $4,000 to $5,000 and then spend a bunch of other money on that car as you fix the other starts that start falling just because usually transmission can't or can line up with other problems in a car on a kind of culminating in a, something you've had for, I don't know, 15-ish years, having other problems. So, and the motherboard can function similarly as that. It's like, look, that just may be the point where you jump off and go, time to get something brand new. Like even the old PC I had, like I replaced that motherboard when I had I moved it. We had this discussion when you had the first issues. It was like I had a motherboard got fried when I moved it one time and like a screw got loose or something on the case and I turned it on and like, whoop, like conducting electricity caused problems. And I updated enough of that I could have probably updated that machine, but like the box of that thing was from a reader at Giant Bomb that had spare parts. I mean, like, it was like, this is done. I don't want to update this thing anymore. I want a new floor. And the new floor was, the one I bought. And like, I'll probably be able to replace what's in that for the next round of upgrades between CPU and GPU before, in 5-6 years, replacing the whole thing outright all over again.
Yeah, so it's just kind of where that stuff ends up, and I think like home stuff is even that, but more so because it's a weird thing because even though it's not as like high tech, but like I don't know if it's I'm maybe this is probably national, but like Patrick, have you heard people talking about like an electrician shortage in your area? There's just not enough electricians for the amount of work. So like it is apparently boom times for licensed electricians because like your time now is very valuable and your dance card is full. And it's like,
is that like COVID consequences of people just doing extended home improvements, or is there more underlying conditions for like less people in the trade?
It's just a few things. There's like a dip in like the number of people I think who took up the trade, and then an increase in the amount of work for that trade that there is. Because like, there's people like me who are like, I want to fix the shitty wiring in my place. So could you come out and like, what started last year is like I want to install a ceiling fan turned into also there's like just a ton of like bad circuits and wiring in here. Could you also address some of that? But then, if you think about anytime people are like, I want to move to a heat pump or something like that, like the HVAC tech is part of that, but so is the electrician. So I think there's a lot of like widespread home upgrades that are happening that require that, but it's a thing where you are definitely, I guess the owning a home thing is where you just sort of exist in that natural state of actually, but I was here even when I was renting. Cause like, it's the question of like, how much do I nest here? Mm-hmm. Like how much do I invest in like making this feel customized to me in this space for my home versus how much do I like recognize that I don't want to be that attached to this place because ideally I want to get the fuck out of here at some point.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had like similar comment, like the stairs in front of our house are functional, but like the cement is kind of, for lack of a better term, fucked up. Like it's not going to hurt anybody, but it doesn't look great. And
that clip, it's not going to hurt anybody, will later be played in front of a jury as someone as a personal injury decision is being rendered.
Well, I've had it looked at. Like I brought like people to come out and quote and like tell me like, okay, like, hey, like if I need to bite the bullet, like what is this from? Like, is this all going to slip apart? And they're like, no, like, but it just kind of looks ugly. And the cement in our backyard underneath our patio has like it's shifted with the ground, like it's not fully level, and it's all like fine, but man, like cement's expensive and it's mostly aesthetic as opposed to practical. But it's one of those like, who wants to spend 10 to 15 grand lifting up cement so that like it looks a little nicer? And I really do want to do it. It bothers me every time I look at it, but it's the same sort of cost benefit analysis like you're making, Rob, is like, that's a lot of money to spend on, like, is that what I want to spend on this home that I think I'll be in for another 10 years, but am I going to be in it for 20? And is that what I want to spend in that 10? Like when I'd rather spend that money inside the house with the things that I interact with more daily. I don't know, but that's a constant struggle.
How much does it cost to rent a jackhammer? Or did you break it up yourself and take out?
It happens to cement's like, I don't want to say it's easy, but like it's over quick. They're like, we can do your front and back in one day, and I was like, so I don't even get to enjoy. Like, I'm not saying one enjoys like watching Rob go through weeks of a project, or I have a friend that's going through a kitchen remodel and it's like 6 weeks of just a portion of your home basically unusable. But there's something about like, damn, like I can see the work. Like, look at them, like bit by bit getting through a thing. And it's like, nah, man, like we'll break up that shit and we'll be out of there in a day.
No, Patrick. No, that's the dream. Because let me tell you, I think for all that I spent, I probably paid for 4 full days of work, 5 full days of work from various folks and trades. It was like very much one of those things where they did a bunch of work and then they're like, all right, well, we can't do any wiring until your fixtures have arrived, in post. So we're just going to disappear for 3 weeks. And then I'm like, okay, the fixtures are here. And they're like, well, obviously, we're going to have to wire the house first. And that's going to take some time. And then we can do the fixtures. And so it's just one of those things where it was like, we were clearly being moved around in their priority queue. And they got to work at peak efficiency, jumping from job site to job site, while we paid the friction of living in a construction site for like 2 months. And so it's one of those things where I don't think it's like where I feel like right now, Emmanuel over at Motherboard, friend of the site, our editor, is doing a kitchen remodel that was kind of forced on him, but I feel like those are things where like guys come in, they tinker, they install things, they, joinery, I think, is really precision work. And there's a lot of getting it just so, and you can see that sort of incremental progress coming together. But like some of this contractor stuff, it's just like what you see is an abandoned job site for like days, weeks going by. And you're like, I feel like if they just showed up, they could like do this, and they just don't. So that's my caution. But yeah, even when I was renting, it was like the whole, I hate the color of these walls, but I'd be a fool to paint them because I will one day move, and then I would have to repaint them to the landlord color.
We got 3/4 of the way through painting our old place. There's one room that we never got around to because it was like each time we did another room, it like a bunch of time crept up. It got too cold, and it's like, well, you want to do this when it's warm because you want to be able to open all the windows and let all the fumes out. Yeah. So it took too many years, and then by the time we were at the last room, we're like, well, we're moving in like 2 years. There's no we're not gonna buy that.
But then
paint.
you also sort of like, wait, but that's 2 years. 2 years is long.
It's so short compared to all the other years.
Yeah, that's the other weird part of it, where it's like, but that's long. Like it was like there was a place where it's like, oh, I don't want to put anything into this home because I'm not going to be here that long. I was in the apartment for 4 years. Yeah. 4 years of like, this place sucks, but obviously I can't make it better because we're leaving soon. And yeah, I will say this though, I feel like the needing to open everything up and ventilate for paint thing is wildly overstated these days. Like that was true of paints when like I was growing up. The paints that we used for this room, it was shocking how like it went down, and then before the painters had even left, it was dry. And it wasn't like we had the whole place open with like wind blowing through or like dehumidifiers going. It was just like bloop. That wall's painted and it's finished. So that was one startling part of this. In my head, it'd been like, oh, painting anything requires basically opening your house to the elements and like trying to breathe clean air while the fumes are just like swirling around you. And instead, it was just like, dude rolls a color onto the wall, and then like 30 seconds later, it's set. And I was like, okay, this was not what I thought it was, because this is not what it was when last I fucked with stuff some years ago. Anyway, I think that will be a wrap on today's episode of Waypoint Radio. if any wild news drops, you're like, why didn't they bring that up? It's because we're recording very early because I'm getting maybe a root canal tomorrow. It's a very exciting dental appointment. Recording this on Wednesday.
Maybe not even just you have an appointment for a root canal. It's maybe a root canal.
Could be a filling.
Ooh, it filled up with a root canal.
Root canal?
Could be a filling. He was like, I'd really have to see. Like, he was like, these X-rays don't look good, but it looks like it's a lost cause. We'll just have to see.
Oh God.
So, I'm going to be in for a fun day at the dentist's office tomorrow morning. But anyway, so that's why we recorded early. Thanks to everyone for flexing the podcast forward, so I could not have to worry about talking for the rest of the week after this procedure. But that doesn't mean there's no more Waypoint coming your way. And if you want more Waypoint, you can follow us on Twitter at Waypoint, Facebook and YouTube, Waypoint Vice. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Zachney. Cado, where can people follow you?
At _Cado_appears.
Patrick?
At Patrick Klepek.
Ren is at Renner Raven on Twitter. And you can also check out, we've published on waypoint.vice.com. Patrick, you got a little thing coming up about the Mario movie, right?
Yeah, I sort of wrote a piece that should be up by the time that you listen to this. Sort of like talking about the point I'd made during the podcast about not wanting to sort of as a parent like treat my children like mini-me's, to be like, you need to be in video games, and yet sitting across from my daughter watching the Mario film and finding that to be really kind of a emotional moment for me. So I kind of expounded upon that in a piece that you'll be able to read up on the site.
And hey, thanks to Waypoint Plus, we've been able to have a bunch of fun streams lately. Patrick and I went back to Dead Space and had a grand old time. I would say Dead Space, a good game. And, even annoying boss encounters can't discourage me from enjoying Dead Space. And I think later this week, Cado and Ren are going to be playing some Darkest Dungeon 2, and we can hear if that game's difficulty is all it is cracked up to be.
You say later this week, but when the listeners
Today.
hearing to this, it's today, later today,
Yeah.
later Friday.
What if Cado shows up and conquers Darkest Dungeon 2?
Oh, that'd be sick.
Just walks up and it's bam.
What if it's like, I've never played Darkest Dungeon 1. What if it's like people trying to play Darkest Dungeon 2 like Darkest Dungeon 1?
But you'll be unpolluted.
Exactly. I have
You'll be like,
I
it's
have
a
nothing
different
going
game.
in.
You have no buy-in to no, it should be like the first game. You'll be like, I don't know. I just see what it is before me.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. So check that out on twitch.tv/waypoint.
Faceplant on stream. Let's go.
And for Waypoint Plus listeners, next week, for real, we are watching Mandy, and we'll be recording an episode on it for my turn. If that sounds good, or you just want more Waypoint, you can go to waypointplus.com and subscribe. Not only do you get access to our premium feed, but you're also helping support Waypoint and everything else we do here. Our theme music is by Bowen. The track is Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. Learn more at waypoint.zone/BOEN. For now, we are calling time on this week. We will talk to you again next week. Until then, fuck capitalism. Go Bulls. I jinxed it. It's going to be Friday, and the Bulls will be eliminated. And people are going to be like,
Rob, the alternative is that they are in their
playing Toronto.
second play-in game,
or not,
because they have to win 2.
The Heat, right? Mm-hmm. They'd be playing the Heat if they win tonight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When they win tonight, when they won tonight.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like I read a piece about this matchup on The Athletic, and that the Bulls have not done real good against the Raptors this season.
No.
But that's when nothing was on the line. Now everything is on the line, and this team is heating up. This team is on an Everspace 2 trajectory.
They're heating. Is that good or bad for them then? They're just giving energy to the Heat.
That's true. Well, the Heat looked like they needed to gain some energy in their game against the Hawks. So we'll see.